episode is going to be a little odd, not for you so much, but for me, because I had intended this to be a review of multiple YouTubers' books, and oh, what joy and fun we all would have had ripping and shredding all of their works to pieces. Oh, call yourself a writer, do you? Rip! But I read several of them, like 5, and my general opinion of all of them except one was, I don't care about this genre, but it's fine. There was even one by The Critical Drinker, right? The Critical Drinker. How interesting would it have been to tear his book apart and to discover that he actually sucks? Ha! Such a big shot YouTuber. Well, your writing is mediocre at best. Well, his writing was more or less mediocre, maybe even above average, but there was nothing for me to actually say about it. I would have had to read it to myself and focus on it to find the issues. When I read it out loud, there was nothing glaring that jumped out at me to talk about. But there was one book that was riddled with errors, and it's by a YouTuber who I would have least expected to have an issue with writing. So this one was actually interesting, and that's the one I'm going to be focusing on today. It's by David Stewart. This guy is fantastic. He has an interesting channel. He's like a wise person. I would almost say his channel is a channel of a wise man. He's got dating advice. He's got financial advice. He's got advice on how to be productive, how to use your time well in general, how to write, how to create stories and archetypes or archetypes or archetypes. I don't bloody remember. I looked this up actually a while back, but now I've forgotten again. Archetype? I think it's archetype. So he's great. I'm going to throw up on the screen, obviously, his channel, and I might even put on the screen some of my particularly favorite videos he's done. Now, he's a very productive individual. He has written many books, and in some ways I'm envious of him. But mostly I'm proud of him, and I'm glad he's getting these works out. But I purchased one of his books called The Water of Awakening, and it was okay. And he's written like 8 books since then, or if not more. And I always assumed that he would just keep getting better and better. And so every time he writes a book, I check it out. I just read the preview on Amazon to see where he is in his skill level now. And he doesn't seem to really be getting any better. In fact, I would say that The Water of Awakening was one of his better books, at least from what I've seen, because it was written in a slightly more classic style. So his narrator had a fairly strong voice, and this sort of gave a thematic consistency or a tonal consistency to the whole writing, which made it a little bit better. I have found in my own writing as well, if you can give the narrator a strong voice, everything else kind of, at least to some degree, falls in line. Because even if you're not that good at creating a character in the story who's particularly strong, if your narrator has a strong opinion, then it'll work, more or less. So we're going to start with David Stewart's book, which is in the Moon Song series. And this book is called The City of Silver. But in this one, I'm going to try to slow down and carefully explain the issue I have with the writing. And it's partly the prose themselves, and it's partly the dialogue even, which is odd because I never considered him to be particularly poor at dialogue. But just the whole scene is weird and doesn't flow well. I'm going to, again, try to edit this down so that I can get all my points out with minimal stuttering, stammering, and pauses. I'm practicing on the mic when I'm not doing an episode to try to get comfortable because I feel like I'm being beset with some sort of performance anxiety. Even though like no one watches this, I still feel like I have to, I still feel worried I'm not going to deliver an excellent product, and all these people, all 7 of them are going to be disappointed. So we're going to start with The City of Silver, Prelude, Power. And this whole power theme of this prelude is really the crux of the issue. It's just, it doesn't work. So here we go. Quote, "Tell me, Vindrel, what is power?" Sarthius Catanel turned his head away from the rail for a moment to regard Claire as she stepped across the threshold to the small balcony overlooking the courtyard. Now, so far, if you think he's talking to Claire, you are sadly mistaken. He is not talking to Claire. He's talking to Vindrel. Now, it's obvious because he says, "Tell me, Vindrel, what is power?" But immediately it says Sarthius Catanel turned his head away from the railing, so we assumed Sarthius Catanel is the one speaking, even though it's a new paragraph, so it's not 100% clear. I prefer when the dialogue is on the same paragraph as the speaker's actions, so you're really sure who it is talking, especially when you don't know how anyone talks yet, so you can't convey who is talking based upon how they talk. So he turns his head away from the rail for a moment to regard Claire as she stepped across the threshold to the small balcony overlooking the courtyard. So if you're not astute, you may accidentally think he's talking to Claire, but he's not. That was my first issue. Below his shock of blonde hair, his green eyes stared at her. So he regards her, but remember, she's the last one to be named and the last one to act in the previous sentence. So in the next sentence, your brain is kind of geared to expect the description to be talking about her. But no, it switches back to talking about Sarthius. Now, I understand the previous sentence started with Sarthius Catanel acting, so it's understandable that a writer would start one sentence with a certain person, and then the second sentence, it would be assumed, is still talking about that person. But because not only does it mention Claire, but it gives a fairly wordy, gives her a fair few words in description herself, it's now muddled. At best, it's not perfectly clear, so that's an issue. Below his shock of blonde hair, his shock of blonde hair, that's one of those things, and I'm not really criticizing him for this, but that's one of those things that everyone has heard if they read books. But how many of you actually know what the crud shock of blonde hair means? Because honestly, I don't. I've read a dozen books or more that use the word shock in this context, but I guess I've just never looked it up, so I really don't actually know specifically what this means. But yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. We know he has blonde hair, that's it. But I don't know if there's some extra connotation to that. But that's not a criticism of the book at all. His green eyes stared at her with the same vacant stillness as when she had met the man years before. She felt a chill and drew her robes around her body tightly. "Power, sir?" Vindrel, the dark-headed captain of the guard, for as long as Claire could remember, stood beside Sarthius, his uniform of blue and green, crisp as always. So, again, now it switches to Vindrel, but he was just spending a lot of time talking about Claire, so the brain is not perfectly primed to understand what's going on. In fact, I think I do a disservice to my point and a charity to the writing by describing the issue as it's happening, because what's going on is I'm sort of painting a tapestry of the issue, and in doing so, I'm also painting a tapestry of what's actually going on. So I may actually make the writing sound more clear than it actually is, but we'll continue. Yes, power. So far, I'm having a problem because everyone's speaking in weird, very short phrases, and they're saying power a whole lot. So tell me, Vindrel, what is power? A few moments later, "Power, sir?" And then Sarthius, "Yes, power." Now, that would not be too bad if it were all in a row, but because it's split up, you're getting a lot of very short clipped dialogue, moments of dialogue that are never, it's taking a long time to lead anywhere, and there's a lot of descriptions and things happening in between all these bits of dialogue, and it's just creating an almost absurd scene here of dialogue with everyone just saying power, power, power. Sarthius stared out of the balcony as Claire crept up to stand close behind him. What does it mean to have power? To be powerful. So see, power is being said a lot. Also, Claire keeps inching through this whole thing, doing her own thing. I know what he's going for. He's trying to keep this sense of movement going, where he's doing this, and then she's coming up behind, and then he's talking to him, and then he talks, and then Claire kind of eases up to the balcony. I get what he's going for, but I feel like maybe it could work if I weren't already so confused about everything else that's going on, but unfortunately, it's continuing to build up in this whirlwind of almost, risible nonsense. To be powerful. This philosophical quandary has been on my mind of late. And then on the same paragraph in which he spoke, he then has, what's her name? Claire getting the narrative focus. So he says, this philosophical quandary has been on my mind of late, and then on the same paragraph, immediately after that quote by him, it says, she could smell the fire. Well, it should have said Claire. Well, first of all, it should have been on its own paragraph. But if you're not going to put it on your own paragraph, its own paragraph, then he could at least have mentioned her by name, so it's clear that we're then jumping back and talking about someone else. But either way, it might end up making it sound like she's the one doing the speech in this instance, which she's clearly not meant to be. She could smell the fire in the courtyard below and quickly piece together what was taking place. She didn't want to look, but knew somehow she would. In the end, she would not be able to avoid it. Sarthius would see to that. Power, Vindrel looked down for a moment. Power is the ability to exact your will, to do what you wish. So I don't think I need to read anymore. You can see how many times the word power is used. You could see how he doesn't make excellent use of his paragraphs. You can see how he doesn't make... He's not completely clear about who is thinking versus who is acting. The actions are not... They're not respective to who's speaking at the time. So there's just a lot of issues right there in 1, 2, 3, 4, in 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. You're getting just a lot of just little mistakes, little bits of confusion that are just make it not a joy to read. So we're going to close out of that one. That's David Stewart's City of Silver novel. I'm disappointed because I feel like he should be far superior to that now after this many novels. However, there is something to be said for focused, intentional practice. If you're not writing with the intention of fixing mistakes that you know you have, then all you're going to do is reinforce mistakes that you don't even know you have. If you practice something, so practice can go 2 ways. You can practice something well and get good at doing it well, or you could practice something poorly and get really good at doing it poorly. And I feel like that's what David Stewart has done. And I think one reason might be because he is a very busy man. He has a book out called The Keys of Prolific Creation, I think. The Key to Prolific Creation. And this book is about how to be very productive. And he is, like, if I were going to buy a book of his, which I think I will, I'm actually going to buy The Keys to Prolific Creation, because he clearly knows about having a heavy output because he is a very prolific individual. And I think that's actually both to his credit and detriment, because it means that he is not able to really put in the time to become an excellent writer. He's merely competent. And that is, for me, that's not sufficient. I not only want to read excellent writing, but I want to be an excellent writer. And hopefully that is David Stewart's wish as well. So that is the episode. I'm going to do something a little bit different today, which I guess everyone would have expected if there were anyone actually watching this. And that is, I'm going to say, thank you for watching as I normally do, but also I'm going to ask that you subscribe if you want to see more, and like the video if you liked it at all, because apparently that's the only way to make things happen. I watched this other YouTuber, I think it was Ryukar, who does gaming, and he did an experiment where he started asking people to subscribe and stuff, and his analytics showed that from the moment he started doing that, his subscription rate just skyrocketed. I don't expect to have a similar effect on my channel, but it might get me a few more likes, and that may help the algorithm spread out my videos a little bit more. So thanks for watching, comment, subscribe, and like the video if you are inclined to do so, and I will see you on the next episode.